Good evening, everybody. My name is Kurt Albright. I'm with the City Mesa Engineering Department. And we're excited that all of you have joined to attend to learn more about this exciting project, the Southeast Mesa Public Library. I'll be the moderator tonight, and we have a list of panel members here to go through a presentation and then answer questions or comments you have regarding this project. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a little chat function. When you see a certain slide or have a certain question, go ahead and enter that in at any time. And then when we get to the Q&A session towards the end of the presentation, we'll start addressing each one of those questions one by one. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our project manager, Zach Kaseya.
All right, thank you, Kurt. Welcome everybody to our second virtual public meeting for the library. As Kurt mentioned, we're very excited to be here. As a team, we've been working pretty hard on refining the design elements, a lot of the feedback that we've heard, and we'll go over that in greater detail tonight. So we're excited to be here. Tonight, the panel members that you'll hear from specifically during the presentation is we have Councilmember Thompson, from our council member from District 6. He's online as well, and you'll hear from him in a moment. We've got Polly Bonnet, the Mesa Public Library Director. Myself, Zach Kaseya, I'm the project manager, and I work in the engineering department for the City of Mesa. We have Kurt Albright, he's our engineering public relations supervisor and MC/facilitator of this public meeting. And then we also have Jeremy Cotter, who's our lead architect from Richard Kennedy Architects, and you'll hear some of the design detailing that we've been able to accomplish directly from Jeremy as well. So with that, I'd like to turn some time over to Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Zach. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I want to thank our Zach and your entire team, Kurt, your entire team, and Polly for all the hard work. Jeremy, you as well, for all the hard work. You know, we from the last meeting we have taken in everything into consideration from what the community has asked us to look at, and we've made changes. Hopefully the community likes the changes we've made. We are going to be limited because of the inflation obviously has hit us, and we've had to make some cuts, but I think overall everyone will really like what they've seen, or what you're gonna see tonight. I also want to thank the community for overwhelmingly passing our bond that allowed us to build this. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Zach. And again, thank you all for joining us tonight.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Thompson, and thank you for your support of the project. I know you're a big proponent of good positive development in Southeast Mesa, so appreciate all your hard work and efforts there. So we're going to turn some time over to Polly, our library director, to talk through the Mesa Public Library, kind of give us an overview of the library system.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Councilmember Thompson. My name is Polly Bonnet, and I'm the Mesa Public Library Director, and I'm just here to give a little bit of an overview of this project. And I'm so excited that we get to share an update with you tonight. For those of you who are familiar with our system, you probably are aware that we've had really wonderful support over the years for expanding our services and renovating our facilities. But as the southeast portion of Mesa began to expand and grow quickly, it became clear that there was a need and demand for library services in that area of the city. And as a result, we had a 2018 needs assessment done that confirmed that community feedback that we received. And as a result, voters approved a 30,000 square foot library in the Great Park of the Eastmark development as part of the 2018 general bond election. And right now we're in the design portion. So that started in spring of 2022, and it should finish up in summer of 2023. And then we hope to start construction that same summer, 2023, opening to the public in 2024. Next slide.
Awesome, thank you very much for that overview, Polly. So I'm going to take the lead on this slide. This is just a general reference location map. There's probably quite a few of you that are familiar with the location, but there may be a few that may not know exactly where the Great Park is, or even the Eastmark community. So really the library site is what's the dashed red line. It is basically in the middle of the Eastmark community at the crossroads of Ray Road and Eastmark Parkway. I'll walk you through a little bit of the labeling on this slide. Again, the red dash area is our library site. It's a vacant lot currently. To the north, there's the Basis School. To the west is City of Mesa Public Park. It's the Great Park, as well as to the south. And you can see a few park amenities highlighted here. The Orange Monster is a big play structure. We do have a multi-use field just west of the site that will play in nicely with as we go through the design details. And then we were fortunate enough to have the lake and the amphitheater, as well as some neighboring amenities like the community center, the Mark there at Eastmark, as well as Steadfast Farms. And then you can see going further up on the map, the Eastmark Great Park continues to the north, and then we are surrounded by a residential area. So from a library's planning standpoint, a location, we're super excited about this location. It's a great setting for a public amenity like a library right there in the park. You don't get these type of locations every day. So as a design team, we're super excited about that. We're going to hear a little bit more about the concept and approach from Jeremy. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Thanks, Zach. I just wanted to again say thanks to everyone. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with the community and work with the city on projects like these. And we're going to have a little bit of a refresher here with these next 3 slides for those of you who maybe didn't catch the first public meeting. For those of you who were with us back then, thanks for coming back for the second meeting. So what you see on the screen is a little bit of a vignette of what we call the concept of the library as a marketplace. And this really derived from thinking about ways that we could take advantage of this very rich location with all these amenities surrounding it. How can we activate not only the interior spaces of the library, but the exterior spaces and make them active public places where the community is excited to engage in the space in a variety of ways. So when we go to the next slide, you'll see how we take that concept and think a little bit more about what that means for knitting this library into the greater context. And I think what you see here is how much the notion of connectivity played in the way we approached the site planning for this library. So we didn't want to create any barriers between inviting people to sort of come into the library from all directions. So you see with these little yellow dots, kind of like an ant trail, it's very open to ingress and egress from east, west, and south. So that we're really supporting the notion of connectivity to both the public spaces that exist to the west of us and to the south of us, and then to the neighborhoods and the schools that are directly adjacent to us as well. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the recap slide from where we left off at public meeting 1. So this was our final slide from our previous meeting, and this is kind of our takeoff point for what we are excited to chat with you about today. So we use that idea of libraries marketplace and arranged the primary program spaces around this idea of a central market. So the notion was to take a bit of each of the primary programs and introduce those programs into the market space to excite library patrons on what they could explore in the library. So each of those spaces has a presence in the central market space. And what you see at the bottom right was a very early conceptual massing diagram that was our sort of point of departure for what you're going to see today. We got a lot of really great public feedback from you all and from stakeholders after this meeting. I think Zach's going to talk a little bit about some of the comments and the feedback that we received, and then we're excited to show you where we've been in the interim.
Thank you, Jeremy. So what's on the screen here is a word cloud, and basically it's a representation of a lot of the words and things that were used in the feedback, both during the public meeting, the comment period after the public meeting. Basically, you take all the feedback and you put it into this program, and it kind of spits out as far as how many times certain words were used, makes the words a little bit bigger and stick out. And one thing I wanted to just point out before we dive a little bit into the word cloud is just we were excited for the outcome of the first public meeting. The community support in the whole southeast region of Mesa has been awesome, and it's been exciting to have positive energy on this project. So I just wanted to just throw a plug out there. Just thank you for the community support so far on the project. And it's been very apparent in this word cloud, a lot of neat things, a lot of community focused areas, The marketplace was a concept that Jeremy explained. So that came up quite a bit in the question, in the Q&A and some of the subsequent comments. But just looking at this, there's a lot of great things. There's things that we logistically need to focus on as a design team, like parking, ingress, egress, safety, security, connections to the great park and some of those events and amenities. And so we took all that into consideration, and that's something we constantly revisit as we continue the design effort. But I think it's a great representation of the community support, as well as a really diverse cross-section of comments and feedback and interaction. And that really helps us as a design team to work through these comments and make a holistic design that better fits the community and the Southeast region of Mesa. I think we're going to go a little bit more now that we've kind of gave the recap of the first public meeting, a little bit more into programming and the library layout, and Polly's going to walk us through these slides. So go ahead, Polly.
Thank you, Zach. So to build a little bit off of what Jeremy had shared a couple of slides back, where you saw those initial boxes and how the design was developed around the marketplace concept, here we'll go into a little bit more of a refined design where you see the adjacency of how different areas of the space are used. That pink portion there is what's considered the marketplace. And we thought it was a really great way to, in physical form, define what a library is today. It's a destination point where people can come connect with others for a variety of different reasons. And it's centered around exploration and learning and discovery. And this was a really great way, as you come into this common area, to have a design that reflects these areas that you can discover and explore that's around that hub of activity. So we'll get started with this top area in the purple. That's the children's library. And one thing, as Zach had mentioned and Jeremy before him, is that we wanted to be responsive to the feedback that we received. And that was really important to us, that we make sure that we are designing this around the community's needs. And one of those pieces of feedback was to expand the children's footprint, which we did. We took that into consideration, and we wanted to make sure that that was very well defined for this area, that we have a lot of young families, a lot of children that will be using this space. One of the comments that we received, several comments actually, was that we would have plenty of reading collaboration space within the children's section. And you can see those refined designs there, the layout that, thank you, Kurt, is pointing to. And we also look to zone off that room. So there's age-appropriate learning activities, age-appropriate material zoned from early literacy, the youngest of ages, through school age to our tweens as you progress towards that marketplace area. And next to it, call it the hat of the building, a little purple, not quite a square, but that's our story time space. Thank you, Kurt. And that would be dedicated to our more defined children's programming, smaller early literacy programs that we hold regularly that you might be used to, our story times, our baby lab sit, toddler times. And in between those two shapes there that form the children's area of the library, we'll have an outdoor programming space that we're really excited about. And then as you move southwards, you see our teen space. We did get feedback from teens, and one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we received was to include huddle rooms or collaboration spaces for studying. And then that square that kind of sits in the middle there, that is for teen programming use. It is an enclosed space. I think that's important to note because teen programming isn't necessarily quiet. And we want them to have a good experience, but also everyone else in the space to have a good experience. So that is a very defined, closed-in portion of the teen space. And then as you move further south, we have the adult area. This was another way that we were trying to be responsive to today's needs. We have in that center portion of the west side of the building what we're calling Zoom rooms. And those were developed to meet the need of anyone who may be working from home or may need a break from working from home and wants to come to a public space, see other people, but also have that private place to work. And again, one of the pieces of feedback we regularly receive is that people want meeting rooms. So we made sure to include those in the design. And then as we go a little bit further, the star of the show, I'll say, is the reading deck that we have for just off the adult area there that overlooks the lake. That can serve as an extension of programming, but also it'll be a nice quiet place to read, whether it's one of our books or if you have a tablet and are using some of our digital collections. And then as you rotate counterclockwise over to that red portion there, that's our multi-use space. That would be for our programming, our children's, adult, and teen programs, and also for our community use. You can kind of see there that there is a little portion off of the south part of that space where you can spill out if you have a meeting onto an outdoor area and extend the use of that space there. And then in the middle portion, the yellow highlighted area is our think spot. That's our maker space. If you are unfamiliar with our maker spaces, it's an innovation hub. It's where we encourage collaboration with newer technology tools and also tools that have been around a while that you just might not have at home, like sewing machines. But we have 3D printers and VR equipment and a studio in that space for podcasting and other uses. And then towards the top, you'll see the staff area highlighted in blue. And right at the bottom corner of that staff area, we have what we're calling a sensory or autism space. Mesa was, I believe, the first ever autism certified city, and one of our library branches is autism certified. And we thought that this was really important as we developed this library and a library into the future, that we had a space that recognized the different sensory needs for our users. Okay, we're ready for the next slide. Thank you. Here you can see how the library sits on the site a little bit better. One of the guiding factors of this design was to integrate the building to the surrounding area and to the outdoors. And you can really see how that factors into this design here, where we have those 3 different entry points into the building and then outward, so you can take advantage of those surrounding amenities that Zach mentioned earlier in the presentation. And also those shaded grade areas that surround the building, that would be outdoor programming space, an extension of our library footprint that would create opportunities for dynamic and passive programming, so we can better connect to the outdoors, but also complement activities that are happening in the park that might be outside of the library space. And different ways that those spaces can be used, that gray shaded area between the community space and think spot, that would be a courtyard area where right now we plan to have something called a farm bot, and that would be used to teach agricultural principles, but also sustainability principles. It could tie into our partners, our neighbors at Steadfast Farms, and also utilize our seed library. And what the farm bot is it's basically a robotic farm bed. So we're excited to bring that into the community as a brand new type of service. And then also you see the shaded portion that I mentioned earlier at the top there that would be outside of the children's library and would also be used for programming. And then the space to the west there that connects the basis school to the library. And one thing before we move on, I really do want to highlight, we know we're coming into a neighborhood that's thriving and active, and we do believe it's going to be an anchor point in the Eastmark community and the greater Southeast Mesa community. And so excited to be a part of this location for a new library in Mesa. Next slide, please.
Thanks for doing that, Polly. That was a great recap. So I thought now I'm going to take everybody through some early renderings. So we're at a stage in our design process that we call design development, where we've sort of figured out the big concept, move behind the architectural approach, and we want to then start exploring materials and forms and starting to share what this library could really look like. So this view that you see on the screen now is a view as if you're standing along Southeast Parkway near where the existing pedestrian crossing is, and you're looking west. So if you were looking all the way through the building here, you'd be looking at the Orange Monster directly across from you. One thing I want to just share is as we started to develop the design after our last point, we actually didn't just chase down one concept. We developed 3 different approaches to how we might want to present this building. And the one that you see here was one we called Pavilion, which was based around the idea of creating this sheltering roof form in the middle that was also inviting. So what you start to see here is the main entry, which is off to the right. The staff space is on the right of the image. And then the think spot space that Polly mentioned is right in the middle. You start to see here how we're using also landscape elements to provide shade to that plaza that's both for parking and for programming functions, and starting to use those trees to sort of tie into the other landscapes that are in the surrounding neighborhood. What you see here is a first pass at what we are looking at in terms of materials. So we're zoomed into the main entry here, and you see the roof form turning up. I like to sort of explain this or think of this as kind of like the tent flap at a market pulling up and welcoming you into the space. You see the main entry. You see some explorations we're doing for potential materials. So we're looking at options for perhaps a weathering steel cladding for the volumes and for a wood material on the underside of the roof and soffit. You start to see on the right-hand side, we are getting ready to develop some opportunities for signage and wayfinding where you see the word library as a placeholder. And I just wanted to point out that the exterior book drop, so for patrons, if you come to the library, you'd be able to park your car here in this plaza, pull over, drop your book outside the library 24 hours a day. There's also an interior drop if you went through the main entry there. So if we continue along, we're going to continue counterclockwise to the south. So now we're just south of where the think spot is, as if we're pulling up to the library. Off to the left of the image in the middle, you see that farm bot garden space that Polly was mentioning earlier, and you see the doors that could spill out of the think spot to access that patio space. You also see here an idea we're playing with the lighting of that plaza space, where we're trying to develop the idea of the market lighting with the festoon lighting that also could come into the interior space to sort of bring that idea of marketplace and activity to the design. As we continue along clockwise around, we're now going to be at the southeast corner of the library where you're seeing the end of the multipurpose room that Polly was talking about earlier. And this is the doors on the south of that multipurpose room that would spill out onto that patio space. You also see here where that roof form takes on a little bit different feel, a very sheltering approach to shelter the reading deck that we'll see in a second, the southern entry, and then really take advantage of the views to the south of the lake and the park that make this kind of what Polly was mentioning earlier, sort of the prime real estate of this library. So as we continue around, you see here in this view, the reading deck that Polly mentioned earlier. So patrons will be able to take any kind of material out onto this reading deck. So that could be physical or digital material. There will be Wi-Fi coverage here. So you can take your favorite technology out here and be assured that you're connected to Wi-Fi in shade, under shade. We're developing the idea of a pollinator garden in this area to support, as Polly mentioned, the fact that we've got steadfast farms, so encouraging butterflies and moths and other pollinators to sort of populate the area and tie into our surrounding community. We're also developing ideas, which you see with the patio space on the south, the white space, where even if you're just walking through the park and you're not in the sort of library proper, it's knitted into the landscape. You have an opportunity to sort of pull over, sit down, read, sit down on a bench, pull your bike over, et cetera, and have this be well knitted into the existing park environment. I think the next view is very similar, but it's just pulled back as if you are south of that lake, looking back at dusk, back to the library. You see that same warm wood soffit and ceiling material that's kind of glowing there at nighttime from this view, and then the garden space to the south as it terraces down to the existing lake. So from there, we want to show a couple early explorations that we're doing of the interior spaces. So this interior space would be as if you came in from the main entry that we first looked at. So On the right of the image where you see those blue chairs as a placeholder, if you were to continue out the door there, that's the door that would lead you out to that existing field that's west of us, the multi-use field, and then the orange monster beyond. To the right of the image is where we're starting to develop where the entry to that children's area is that Polly spoke about earlier. On the left is where we're exploring the idea of the staff service desk, the main sort of point of service for staff members to assist patrons. And then behind that, you see the volume for the teen space that'll be active and glassy, make sure that it's safe, so it's monitored. And then further to the left of the image, you see the roof form and then the opening up to the park view and the lake to the south. And the next image we're going to see is a second interior image that we're developing as if you came into the library from the southern entry near where the reading deck is. So the think spot would be off to the right. We're working with Polly and her team to make sure this marketplace area is populated with really exciting media. So best loved books could be in here, public PCs and areas in the middle to use laptops, adult media, the seed library, the stuffed prairie, a lot of exciting things that will be populated in this area. Here you also see the idea of that sort of festival or market lighting that we're exploring, bringing into the interior space as well. And then off to the left, you see the adult collection that we're using as a bit of a buffer to separate this sort of active marketplace from the quieter adult reading areas that'll be near where the reading deck is on the left-hand side of the diagram here. So we're, again, very excited to share this with you. We appreciate everybody being willing to lend your time and then share your comments and ideas with us. With that, I'll turn it back over to Kurt to talk a little bit about the Q&A and the commenting.
Thank you, Jeremy, and everybody. So we've already started getting questions coming in, so please pick up your tablets or whatever device you're using and enter in your questions. The first two questions we'll start with was, we had at the very beginning of the presentation, we talked about when this will be open. So now that people have seen how exciting it is, we just remind the audience here what our schedule is to finish up design, start construction when the library will open.
I can take that one, Polly. I know that was on your slide that you'd mentioned, but basically the project schedule as we currently are at, we're as you can see, we have some conceptual plans that we're refining. Our next step is to move into, we'll take the feedback from this meeting and then the other subsequent design related meetings that we'll have in the next few weeks, come together as a design team and then really launch into furthering the design and design refinement. And so that will take a little bit of time to work through a lot of that detailing, cost estimating, looking at different materials, working through permitting and all that. And so that design will take us till about early summer of next year to get through all the design, detailing, permitting, and so everything's ready to go at that point. And then we're estimating about a 1-year construction from initiation, start point to library opening. So opening summer of 2024.
Great, thanks, Zach.
Is our current project schedule. Yep, you're welcome.
Excellent. Okay, so we're obviously getting a lot of comments about what they love and how stunning the building is, things like that. But let's get into some of the details about the book drop. Will it be a drive-through or a walk-up or both?
Sure, I can answer that. Maybe we should go to the site plan, Kurt, and we can walk through that.
There we go.
So the book drop will be, so the loop that you see on the right-hand side of the drawing there, just south of where the pedestrian crossing is, that's going to be the drive loop that's developed in the plaza. There's a small little sort of semicircular arc that's left. So we have 2 pull-off, what we call lay-by spots, where you'll be able to pull your car off and then just walk about 30 steps or so to the book drop. So it will not be a drive-up book drop, but it will be a book drop that's accessible 24/7 from the exterior of the space that'll feed right into the library system and catalog that it's in. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just to the left of the exterior book drop, there'll be an interior book drop. So if you've got your hands full of books or you're distracted and you accidentally walk past the exterior one when the library is open, you can just turn to your right and still drop it right into the system. We're also developing a remote book drop option that will be near the southern entry. So for folks that are maybe parking further south that don't want to do the loop, you will still be able to remote drop your books like you do, for instance, at Thompson or at the main branch currently, and staff will come and retrieve those books from there.
sounds a good mixture of everything. You can drive up, park, walk it in, go into the building if you're going to get something else, and also schedule a pickup from your vehicle. Okay, great, excellent. So some of the lighting that's outside in the parking lot and inside, is that kind of like a festival style lighting? I think referring to the cable style lighting we saw in some of the renderings. I'll pull that up when we address that.
Yeah, it is. We're just getting started with some early concepts, but what we wanted to do is provide an approach that we felt supported the concept of library as marketplace. And it also was being cognizant of putting the light where it's needed to be, not sort of shining up, not causing problem in terms of dark sky. And then a lighting approach that we could actually sort of have universal throughout the campus. So not only in the plaza space, but one that we could bring into the marketplace inside. So early concept, but this is the direction we're looking forward to exploring on the project.
Thank you. And there will be like any kind of bicycle parking options or areas to lock them up or space in the library, things like that. Talk about when people bring their bikes or skateboards to visit the library.
Yep, we do have bike parking. We'll have bike parking on the south and also, well, really on the south and the east. So yes, opportunities to park bikes, lock up bikes and skateboards on both sides. We haven't explored. I think there could be an option. We know a lot of folks will be really kids. We know that when Basis Mesa lets out, we'll get a lot of activity streaming across the west side of the park into the west entry of the library. So there's an opportunity there to maybe think about skateboards or other things that the kids might have with them as they're coming to the library from that side.
Good, good. You know, if everybody can see these comments, they're always fun for me to read. I love them. And you know, we go through this kind of process so that everybody can kind of hear the question and the response, but also it gives you a feel for the awesome community members that are out there. So we have some questions from an old timer, as they put it. Talk about digital media and the book area. Is it more of a trend leaning towards more digital, or to have physical books, or both? What does the library do to kind of accommodate both, to make sure there's enough material on both sides of that?
I can answer that question. So yes, the trend towards digital is increasing. However, right now, if you look at our circulation of material, it's probably closer to 60% physical, 40 digital, but that can move 70-30. So there's still a high demand for physical material. That being said, I think during the pandemic and when the only access you might have had was digital collections, we really saw that grow. And the ease of use, the expectations of consumers. You know, we have all the streaming services. We have access 24/7 to digital collections. So that's something that we know is a demand and we're always developing. But we pay attention to what, how our patrons are using our services, what they're asking for, and we're always open for input as well. So while we know there's going to be physical material and we plan accordingly for space within this new library, we are allocating the adequate amount of space for those physical collections. We're always growing and expanding our digital.
That's great. The amount of services that are available, the streaming services you mentioned and all the digital and physical things, that's quite the collection. So should have something for everybody there. So being in that area, yeah, go ahead.
I have a comment to that as well. Polly did a wonderful job covering that. One of the things we're looking at from a design team, and I don't want to throw this term out there, I know we talked about it in the first meeting, is future-proofing the library as well. And so that's a concept as we're working on design. Yes, we're designing for today's content, media, and functionality, but also keeping the library design flexible enough that it can change, morph, adjust with future trends and future needs, honestly. So it is a very flexible building space by design. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's definitely something, so it won't feel like a dated library or public facility 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, that it has enough flexibility within the design that it can morph and change with the trends in society. So I just wanted to throw that future-proofing concept out there as well.
Absolutely. So as part of that design, what type of materials are we going to use to help keep the noise down? So when people are studying, whether it's noise from outside events going on, inside events, things like that, what type of materials are we going to use to make sure that's kept in check?
I can talk about that. So I think Polly mentioned one of the best techniques is really how we detail the enclosed spaces. So how we think about the details of, for instance, the team volumes, the huddle spaces, the multi-purpose spaces, the story time, et cetera. So we will develop the detailing and the materials to sort of make sure that we select things that are appropriate to sort of cut down on the decibel level for anybody that's outside that space. In the primary space, even though we're sort of showing this early version of the wood ceiling, that'll be a system that has an acoustical fabric above the ceiling. So even in the primary market library space, that ceiling would have a slatting, it'll have an acoustical material above it. The shape of the ceiling will also sort of help deter stuff from just sort of traveling in one direction. So we'll have some softer materials. There will be carpeted areas in the children's zone and the primary adult area. So it's really through a combination of selecting some softer surfaces and then how we detail the connections and provide sort of acoustical properties. So anywhere we have harder surfaces that we can cut down on that. So it's something we're very aware of, we're very used to. So we'll be developing that as we move forward.
All right, keeping with the design, talk about how security will be kind of handled for the library itself and then surrounding area. Once this gets there, there's going to draw a lot of attention, a lot of people coming in and out. How does the city and library handle security in this area?
Polly, do you want to take the inside and maybe I'll take a little bit of the outside, like the park space?
Sure. As far as the interior security, at the most basic level, we have a code of conduct, and that's something that we enforce. Outside of that, as far as technology, we do have security cameras in all of our buildings, and that's common for our public spaces. Currently, we have security officers at all of our locations. That can change depending on what our resources are at the time, but it is a high visibility space as well. That's one reason, having these floor to ceiling windows and being maximizing that outdoors and indoors connection is you're able to see what's happening in the space as well. And so I think that's an important part of the design.
Thank you. And I wanted just to mention, as far as in the setting, in a public park setting, there's kind of two things I wanted to focus on. The first is activation of a space. And I know this is something, there's a lot of park sites and public type sites throughout the city of Mesa. Each site's a little bit unique. But what we found is if you can bring out amenities and activate the space, a lot of the undesirables or negative things tend to go away. And so that's one of the things we want to do. And the Great Park is a very active space. I don't know that there's really any real issue with security to date. And I think a lot of that lends itself to just a very active pedestrian-based community. So you get a lot of people, a lot of community ownership of that public space, and that's from a public land planning standpoint, that's like a huge success, is to have the space activated. The other thing I wanted to mention is the city of Mesa does have park rangers, and they do periodically drive through in and around the park sites. Especially if there's any concern, they'll focus more on a specific area in times of concern. And so as far as from the outside in, the Great Park will also have some of the park rangers will be a visible presence there as well.
That's good. And the community too always helps with that. If you see something, say something. But I like the idea, well lit, lots of windows, you can see what's going on. It's good. So keeping with that, now we've talked about the physical building itself. How about the materials? You've got an area where you can go be looking at a book and then walk outside. How does the library handle people from just walking off with things, or do they need to check things out before they go outside? How does that work in this facility?
That's a good question. We'll be working out those details, but how it works currently in our facilities is we utilize, at least if it's physical material, RFID, and that is tied to security systems, security gates. As you enter and exit the building, if an item isn't checked out, that alarms. So you deactivate it by the process of checking it out. Now, as far as the reading patio and some of those outdoor spaces that are enclosed, that may be that it's a different, since it's a different entry point, we may not have those security gates, or we might. Jeremy, have you considered that far in the design yet?
Yeah, we have. We can look at that rendering from the reading deck, and that may help a little bit too. So at least we have a lot of experience with library design. So at least our first approach is that, you know, patrons would be able to take materials out onto that reading deck, but it's really surrounded by a garden space and there's some level changes. So even though you go out on the deck and you're not necessarily going through a gate per se, you're not checking the book out at that point. You're sort of enjoying it on the reading deck. So you can't really wander off with it. You're sort of pinned in there, even though it looks, it is very welcoming and inviting, but you're not really going to wander off with the materials. If you do choose to check it out, you would go back inside the library. You would use one of the, you know, either check it through a staff member or use a self-check station that are located near all the entry and exit points. And then you could check it out, as Polly said, it would deactivate it, and then you could be free to go through the gate without worrying about the alarm bleeping at you. So I think it'll be something that's going to give people flexibility to hang out on that reading deck, even if they choose not to check it out, just to enjoy it for the time they're out there, and they can return it if they wish or check it out.
Okay, how about the overall building design itself? There's a lot of, you know, heavy storms. We get the monsoons and other things with high winds. Is, you know, talk about the design, how that incorporates to be able to resist to that.
Sure. Yeah, the structural system of the building will be what's called a steel braced frame. So you probably see those, the kind of the black steel columns in the building itself. It'll have what we call a lateral load resisting system. So those columns and in the solid walls, they get all sort of X-braced to each other and tied off. So it being a one-story structure too, it's much less resistant to any kind of trouble than a sort of taller structure would be. Just in terms of how we deal with the water when it does rain, it's something that we've really considered a lot. So in terms of stormwater management, 100% of the stormwater that hits the site on this library site is going to be dealt with at the library site. So we are working actively now to think about ways where we can actually collect the runoff from the roof and then slowly use it through the landscape. So we might hold it and detain it in certain areas and make sure it's able to be used for the desert landscape. In the parking plaza, we also have the ability for that water to infiltrate through the plaza and be held in a gravel base below that, so that it's not just sort of running off into the street or washing away into the parking lot, but it's actually being held, and it can eventually percolate or head south to where we've got the garden spaces, and then ultimately could go back to the lake just south of us.
Good. Well, you actually answered a couple other questions about the rainwater harvesting with that as well. So you must knew that was going. So keeping with that, a little more on the design, is there any thoughts about EV charging at this location?
We have, that's a good question. I guess I'll speak a little bit to sustainability as it relates to the EV charging. We don't currently have EV charging planned. However, I will say the current plan is to provide an option for covered parking at the staff area with solar panels, photovoltaics. So it's something we could consider. As we're developing the design of the library, I know there was, during the first public meeting, there were some questions about LEED. So I'll just give everybody an update. We are currently tracking for what would be the equivalent of what's called LEED Silver in terms of sustainability. That includes everything from reduced energy consumption in the library, from using LED lighting, using really highly efficient mechanical systems. We talked a little bit about the stormwater and water management. We'll have low flow toilet fixtures in the facility, so we're not going to be wasting water from toilet flushes or anything like that. We're thinking really carefully about the materials that we choose for the interior of the space. So we have low VOC material, low or no VOC materials, nothing that's on what's considered the red list, where it's going to cause any body problem that has allergies or breathing problems. So the indoor air quality will be really clean. So the EV charging is something we could certainly consider, I think, as we move forward. So Zach and Polly and I can look at that as we develop the design.
Excellent. Yeah, I know the
We'll
city is always
also-
interested in that.
We'll also reach out to our environmental division at City of Mesa, work with them specific to that comment, because I think there's a great opportunity not only in this immediate parking area, but even throughout the Great Park and some of the other city-owned parking lots. So that's definitely something we'll internalize that and include a couple of other departments in that discussion.
Yeah, I know there's lots of that stuff in the works, so we'll see what comes of that. It's great. Thank you. So going back to the interior there, with a lot of that glass spacing, we do live in Arizona, so you get sunlight hitting different areas, things like that. Talk about air movement in there. How do we keep the space cool? Maybe the roof line, does it affect how we do that as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do a lot of studies. We've done a lot and we'll continue to do a lot of studies with digital modeling. So we used the model of the roof, and a lot of the roof shape and the overhang depth at the different sides of the building is derived from those solar studies. So we really work carefully. We essentially run the sun around the building multiple times over the course of the year and make sure that we're not catching incidental heat gain on the glass. So you'll see the overhangs are developed in a way to shade the building. Part of the reason we put the huddle rooms on the west, aside from the fact that they were requested for the teen and the adult spaces, is that actually helps that west facade, which is one of the tougher facades to deal with at the end of the day, where the sun is low and we're getting direct sunlight in. You'll notice that those huddle rooms actually have a solid face on that west facade, so it keeps us from inadvertently catching a bunch of heat gain in from the west. In terms of the interior air, what we are doing to serve the space is actually using the tops of all the various volumes. So the top of the teen area, the top of the huddle spaces, the community, and the think spot. And that's where we're actually pushing cool air out into the space. So that cool air will be able to sort of flow out from those spaces and mix. And then we've got the ability to do our return air high. So you mentioned, Kurt, the question of what the roof form does for us. The roof allows us to, we all know that hot air will sort of seek out those taller parts of the roof. So our return air can be located in those taller parts of the ceiling. So we're pulling the hot air from those spaces, and we're really focused on cooling the lower part of the air where we know the people are. That also helps with our energy efficiency because we don't bother to sort of worry about cooling all that air up at the top of the roof to 72 degrees. We'll let it get a little warmer because we know people are not up there. That also cuts down on our energy use in our cooling bill over the course of the operation.
Good. All right, let's talk about our furry friends that may want to visit the library. Some questions about are there any considerations for support animals, or if you're walking your dog, things like that? How does the library handle that kind of situation?
So as we love our animals, I'll just say that up front. And we do have programs where you can read to dogs or there's been other animals you could read to too, but we have centered around dogs lately. So we follow as a public facility, city facility, that only service animals are allowed into the space at this time. The exception is, like I mentioned, we have specialty programs, and if your dog is trained or if you're a handler for a therapy animal, we do programs surrounding that. But as far as animals or pets in the space, it is service animals only.
Thank you, Polly. We've got a last few questions here. Again, this will kind of be our last chance to get a few more questions in before we go to the close of the program and talk about how you can provide the city with additional comments that you may think about later. So we'll get in that in a few minutes, and we'll just address the last few comments that are coming in. We haven't talked a lot about this Think Spot yet. So Polly, you'd mentioned some of the equipment that'll be in there. Can you just highlight a little bit more, maybe one more time, for people that didn't hear, what type of equipment is available to use in the Think Spot makerspace?
Sure. So that main portion of Think Spot there is our collaboration space. And then you see two areas that are more linear, thinner at the north section of the space. And that would be a studio. In our studio, you can do anything from film commercials for a YouTube channel to start a podcast or record your podcast. We have equipment like 3D printers, glow forges, vinyl cutters. We have an X-carve machine. We'll have VR equipment. We have DJ equipment. There's just a variety of different things that you might not regularly have in your home, but we want that space to be very technology forward. And honestly, the entire library will serve that purpose as well. But in that space, it centers around the creativity, the collaboration of those different pieces of equipment. And
That's great.
as far as types of 3D printers, we usually have Ultimakers, I believe. And I know that question has come up.
Yeah. And there's staff there to help too. You know, every time I've gone into the library, there's people there willing to help, show you how to use that. So
Definitely.
it's a great opportunity.
And other people in the space. It's great when you have that synergy and activity in the space where you can help one another.
Right. And then last question here, at least currently, is talk about the bathrooms. I noticed there's several different areas that look like maybe bathrooms. Can we talk about access to bathrooms where they're at in the library?
Yeah, I can probably take that one if that's okay, Polly. So one of the things we heard from the first public meeting was a similar question about the location of the restrooms. So you'll see the red zone that's right kind of nestled in there where the think spot is. We made a conscious effort to sort of take them out of, they were kind of in the corner of the staff area where they kind of where the autism and the other spaces are now. They were a little kind of outside of the sort of the main area. We purposefully put them much more centrally located, so a lot easier to get to. So those are the main public restrooms, so they're very easy to get to from the multi-purpose space or really any place in the library. We also do have family restrooms over in the children's area, so in the purple zone, right where that dot is, there's family restrooms right there. We wanted to make sure that, you know, little ones sometimes don't exactly know when they need to go, so you got to get there quickly. So aside from having that be there for the children's library, it's very conveniently located with the story time in case, you know, it's like, hey, I got to go now. You zip right out of the story time room and you're there. And then staff also have a separate restroom for themselves in the blue area as well.
Thank you. Okay, that does it for questions that have been submitted so far. So let's talk about how people can reach out to us if they think about something tonight as they're going to bed or tomorrow at work or whatever activities they're doing and they want to provide additional comments or have questions. The way we're going to do that here is we're going to get to that slide. Bear with me a minute. It's very important so that you guys know how to get a hold of us and provide those comments. So when you registered, you entered your email, your contact information. So right after this meeting, a survey will pop up. And if you want to provide additional comments, you can do so then. If you decide you want to wait a while, we have our comment deadline open till October 11th. So at any time, you can answer that survey. It'll come to your email, so you don't ever lose it, and you can respond to that. You also can email us directly, right, to the project team via our public relations general email box. Please include that your question or comment has to do with the Mesa Public Library, and we'll get that directly to the team designing this public facility. So those are the different ways you can email us or answer that survey. So we look forward to hearing more of your comments, and soon you'll be seeing activity out there on the site later down the road, incorporating the lessons we've learned and items we've demonstrated tonight. We want to thank everybody for their time and coming to this meeting and seeing this exciting project and providing their feedback. And thank you, panel members, for attending and doing such a great job. Look forward to working with the community and have everybody have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.